The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Quirky Dog Podcast, inspired by some of the quirkiest dogs you can ever imagine and the owners who love them. This podcast is brought to you by the quirky couple themselves, Scott and Jess Williams. Their aim is to educate and entertain. Here's Scott and Jess.
Welcome, guys, and happy Wednesday. Today we are going to talk about fighting within the household, but first we're going to start with the quirky tip of the day. All right, our quirky tip of the day is, if you do have two dogs in any way, shape, or form fighting, condition them to a muzzle. That does not mean that they have to live 24/7 in muzzles, but if you have any aggression within your household and you plan to have both of these dogs staying in the same household, condition them to a muzzle separately and allow them to be happy to live in a muzzle. Very good tidbit and important piece of information. So
well, they're not going to live in a muzzle, but they should be able to accept one.
Yeah, exist in a muzzle if they need to.
You can start working through some scenarios in a safe way, there's things you can do.
By live in a muzzle, I mean walk around freely and drink water and feel comfortable in the house walls in a muzzle. So
that's so mean.
Stop it. So we have this situation come up enough. I would say it's not a huge subset of our clientele, but there definitely is. There are some standouts that this has been the situation, and we need dog training, but we specifically need dog training because two dogs or more within the household are fighting. And we most recently just had a dog dropped up for boot camp. He is a Frenchie, and him and the Malinois are fighting. And I mean, the Malinois is going to kill the Frenchie probably. So you have to address this. You cannot make this a thing that, you just pretend like it's not there, because the fighting escalates, the dogs start putting up their guard sooner and everything else. So
they get expensive too.
It can. I would say, I'll just say right from the get-go, same-sex fighting can be a lot more intense sometimes. It's not that, males and females do not ever fight, but, male-on-male aggression, and more specifically from what we've seen, female-to-female aggression can be super intense. I think one of the client situations that we weren't able to solve was two female pit bulls, and literally it ended with they both stand beds, they both stay in crates, but you're going to have to live a separate household together. We were never able to get those two female pit bulls to coexist. And no offense to pit bulls, no offense to females, but it is something to consider. And you kind of have to put your options out there on the table, like what is best for us, what is best for the dogs. Sometimes rehoming is the best thing. One of the dogs, if they're safe enough to go to another home and you have a viable option, sometimes that is the best thing. But the sooner you intervene and the sooner you start creating rules and structure, the better and the more chance of success from what we've seen.
Yeah, a lot of times it's a redirect. Sometimes it's not even about sometimes that these two dogs don't just get along. It's
they're overstimulated with something else.
Something will happen. Yeah, it's like they both run to the window barking at the mailman, and then one turns and nails the other one, and then it turns into a fight. And it's like those kind of triggers.
Or the fence.
Or another one I had was the household with the kids was very
chaotic.
Yeah, unstable. And there was one of the kids was very aggressive. And when the kids started fighting, the dogs would just start fighting. And then they come to me about the dogs, and I'm like, well, when is it happening? Well, when our son becomes violent, then the dogs start fighting with each other. And it's like, well, that's a tough one.
Yeah, but it's a very specific trigger.
Yeah, it's specific, but unpredictable too. And so, sometimes, the dogs are picking up on the energy of the household. And if it could be a boyfriend-girlfriend fighting.
Yeah.
It could be, I've been in that situation too, where, the boyfriend and girlfriend get into a loud, vocal fight, and the dog will bite the guy. Yeah. I mean, that, those kind of things, and a good bite too, like the dog gets protective of the woman, that kind of thing. So it's tough. Well, that wasn't a dog thing. but aggression that has to do with people getting worked up.
No, but the two dogs could, turn and fight just because of the energy of the household. If there is no external trigger and you just have a dog that hates another dog for XYZ reason, and it's not something where you can control resources, like, Bones trigger it, okay, we're not going to have Bones involved, or the doorbell triggers it, okay, like, when we have guests come over, or, we're expecting something, we're already going to have those dogs created. If they're starting to just develop this, like, underlying, seeding hate for one another, you have to get in on the front end. And what does that look like? For us, and we say it for pretty much every topic we ever talk about, the first thing to do is create structure, create rules. Make sure that if things start to escalate and the dogs look a little bit snarky, you have enough control to say, hey, get over there, go get on your bed, get in the crate. If they start to resource guard you when they're on the couch from another dog, get off. You need to start being able to control the situation and control the household so this now does not escalate into a fight. Because, like Scott said, it can be a very expensive situation. It can be life-threatening depending on the two different dogs fighting. And it just gets more and more intense with the repetitions, and it causes a more stressful and hostile environment for everybody. So start to get in on the front end by creating structures and creating rules for the two dogs that are, definitely intertwined in it. And for any dog that isn't like a senior that has more than 2 years left in that household, the more control you have over every single freaking dog in that house, the better. And the only reason I phrased it like that is I'm envisioning like this 16-year-old poodle, like with its tongue sticking out, that's very frail. And now you're all like, okay, like we're going to teach you a 10-minute downstay. Like, there's certain situations where you don't have to involve every dog that's in the household in training. But for the most part, the more control you have over each and every one of those dogs is going to help your cause. And we say this because this is what we tell our clients, and this is how their lives improve.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I have a client now, she may be watching. She called me about, it's getting to be probably 2 months ago now, where she came in, she has 5 rescues, never did any training with any of them. They all seemed to coexist pretty well for, several years. And then she called me because she came back from a walk with one, came in the door, and all the other dogs kind of rushed the door. And then the one that was on the leash got aggressive with another one. They had a little fight, So that's why we came in to just deal with these 2 particular dogs. And it turned out after a few classes that she's realizing, holy smokes, I don't have control of any of these dogs because things are popping up left and right. And I recommend that she started creating all the dogs, feeding them in their crates. And things have gone really well in that house. I mean, it's the kind of thing now where when she goes to get the breakfast ready, all these dogs just take off and they're in their crates, just waiting. Yeah. And she goes in and feeds them and closes the crates. But she's got some more structure. But what was interesting was when she started putting some control on these dogs, she found other, some of them were really fighting the control. Oh no, you're not making me do that. I'm not doing this.
Yeah, training each dog individually definitely unveils those dogs' individual strengths and weaknesses.
So things are going much better, but it took the one dog being snarky to realize this is a bigger problem than this one dog. There's a lot going on here.
Completely.
And then, the husband said at one point, well, why do we have to do this? We've never had to do this before. Well, you didn't have to do it before because there wasn't any fighting.
Yeah.
But now there is. Now it's a different dynamic. There's, so you got to address it. That's just the bottom line.
Pain points drive action. All right, let's go to break super quick. When we get back, we're going to talk about more about fighting in the household.
Want to keep up with all the latest from the Quirky Dog podcast like me and Murphy here? Then make sure you head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Or if you prefer to listen to the madness, go on over to iTunes or Spotify and follow the Quirky Dog podcast. And hey, while you're there, leave a rating and review and let them know what you think of the show. Until then, keep it quirky.
All right, we're back. So another thing that I want to point out is, you have a fight, and then a lot of times now the stress just is escalated quickly, right? Like the hysteria, there's a big concern, and it's like, oh my God, I'm letting out so-and-so, make sure this one's, behind the door. And you're creating more energy and unhealthy energy in the environment than you need to. I'm not saying don't keep dogs safe. I'm not saying don't use baby gates, don't use leashes, all of this other stuff. But you should have enough control in the household where both dogs can be in the same room on a bed. You could have maybe one dog roaming around the room while the other dog's on a bed or in a crate. You don't want these dogs like targeting each other to that extent where they see a dog in the crate and now they're like literally going after that dog, trying to get to that dog. Like that is creating more of a concern than you want. You want to be able to coexist with rules, with control, and you want to make sure that you have control over the household. And if you absolutely cannot get to that point, you really need to have a hard look at things and say like, okay, are we willing to live a life where it's kind of crate and rotate depending on which dog is out when, and we're really going to manage that 24/7. Scott and I have always had a dog or two, mostly the males, that they did have to have specific rules, and we are willing to take that action just because we're used to dealing with difficult dogs and stuff like that. For the average household, that isn't a situation or a realistic situation that they can entertain. We mentioned earlier, is rehoming on the table? Is the right home available? Are you able to physically do that? Is that something you're able to physically and emotionally do? That is a heart-wrenching decision sometimes. You need to really have a hard look and a hard discussion with yourself and your family. What are we able to do? What are we realistically able to do and willing to do? And then when you decide, yes, we're going to keep them both, we're going to make sure this is really an important priority for us, you need to make sure you are not putting them in any situation where they can fight. They should not have unsupervised yard time. They should not be out during feeding if that is a trigger. You need to start implementing different protocols to make sure that another fight doesn't break out. And while we're on the topic, you need to make sure that you have a way to stop fights if something does break out. Like, a lot of times like a loud horn or the spray from the sink or something can break dogs up. But you need ways to manage that, because now if there's two dogs all of a sudden fighting in the house and you're home alone, you can get bit and it can be a big issue. So you need to really be honest with yourself about what the future looks like and how you're going to be able to set things up properly. And then if management breaks down, what that may look like as well.
Yeah. And if you're, if you have, a few dogs in the house that are intact, you have a lot of hormonal things going on there. We have dogs that are, that are intact in the house, and they're stronger. Typically, they're stronger. That's why we keep them intact. But it requires more management. And one of the dogs we have in now for the boarding and training, when they got in touch with us after this fight, they said, we want to get the dog in for training because we don't want to manage these two dogs for the next 10 years. And I said, with or without training, there's going to be management.
Yeah.
Do not even pretend or can think that training is going to make it so you don't need to manage these dogs anymore.
Yeah, there's no miracle answer with that.
No, I mean...
And the hormones matter, and that's also a good point to bring up. If you're having males fighting and you have a female in heat, that can be a really quick trigger too, and that can create a lot of energy and a lot of undue stress as well. So definitely look at hormones in the house and how those things are affecting one another. And do your due diligence. Train from the get-go. Don't wait until there's a problem. Make sure if you're going to be bringing another dog into the household, you have decent control over the dogs you already have. And then that new dog that you bring in, make sure you're putting rules and structure on that dog too. The dog should be accustomed to going in a crate. The dog should be able to walk on a loose leash. The dog should have a decent recall. The dog should be able to stay on a bed. These are all very, very, very basic pet dog things that are kind of a lost art nowadays, but we harp time and time again with people, and it helps anxiety, it helps aggression, it helps the owner's stress levels. These are the ways that we heal these dogs and these owners, and it really does have a huge impact. And we've been doing it for over a decade together. Scott's been doing it 2 decades on his own, and it works. Giving the dogs a job and being able to tell the dogs, like, go get on your bed. I'm good if UPS is here. Don't worry about if your sister has a marrow bone and you don't. Just deal with it and follow the rules. It helps the dog's headspaces, and it helps prevent these disasters where you have this inter-household fighting and it's just escalating and escalating and escalating.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the intact dogs, most of the people I know that have intact males and females, they're trainers already. Like, they already know what that's all about. So they're able to work through those issues, and they're able to manage and all that stuff. Another trigger for dog fighting can be a dog that has a big health, is compromised with their health.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah, you get this, an old dog that all of a sudden starts having, seizures, or is limping, it's weak, it's giving off an air of death, or just like it's coming to the end of its life, within, months or so. It's like they become a target for healthy dogs, almost like they become bullies. It can happen that way. And so the dogs need to have enough respect for you where you can tell them, hey, back off or go lay down. You need to be able to control the pack. That's the bottom line. And
if you can't, for some reason, control your younger dogs around your old feeble dog, you protect that old feeble dog like it's freaking a pot of gold, okay? Like literally, like
that dog shouldn't go through that crap.
Yeah, that like if you see even any freaking bullying behavior, you start to stand up and become an advocate for that dog. But that is kind of more of a common one than you would think.
It happens
like
a lot.
They're good, and then they're, like Scott said, targeting weakness. Like they're seeing this and they're like, oh, like I don't like that. We're gonna weed that out of our house. So be an advocate for the older dog in that situation. And it just goes back to like, what can you do in these situations? If your dog starts stancing another dog, you should be able to recall a dog out of that situation 100%.
Or interrupt it immediately. See a dog locked.
They should change their behavior when they hear you, clap your hands, say their name, yell some random, whatever it's going to be. That should make your dogs change their behavior or at least check in. That is a really important relationship thing here that you should be able to have in your house. So, okay, recalling the dog is one thing. Using beds is another thing. Letting them drag a leash around. Sometimes it's just as simple as being able to pick up a leash when things get a little bit out of hand and be like, come on, come over here, redirect the dog. Crates. If you're not familiar, we're really big on crates. We think they're a really great thing to have, and we would suggest that you get your dogs conditioned to a crate. And if you have aggression issues, even if you have an adult dog and you've never used a crate before, buy a freaking dog crate, get them conditioned to a crate, work them through the learning curve of that. It changes the whole dynamic of the household, and it is one of the number one things that set owners up for success. Aggression or not, but especially with aggression, it's going to help you a ton.
Yeah, we had Denise Fenzi on, a couple months back, and she said something that made sense. She said a lot of things that made sense, but she was talking about how trainers and people that are really dog savvy, they head off these conflicts like 5 steps before it's a conflict. Yeah. So we don't even think, we think everything's great. Like our dogs never fight. We don't have any problems, but we're doing little things here and there to keep everybody in check. Like, yeah, I saw that lip curl. Go knock it off. And like my dog Jimmy, he would be a total dick if he was in a pet house. He likes to guard toys. He likes to leave bait toys out for other dogs. Like, go ahead, let me see you pick that toy up so that he can nail them.
Yeah.
But now, he'll be on a bed and a dog will come over. He'll drop a toy right off the edge of his bed, and there'll be a loose dog in the room, and the dog will start walking over. And I'll just say, Jimmy. And he'll turn and stare at the wall because he knows he can't control himself. Yeah. He can't look at that dog without sneering. Yeah. So he'll turn and look at the wall because he knows he's not supposed to do that.
Yeah. The border collies are bad behavior.
Yeah,
I have a border collie one too. Yeah, but my dog Sank, when I'm creating both her and Vital, she'll go into Vital's crate only because she just knows I'm going to start something and I manage that. But little things like that, it's trigger, oh, I'm in the wrong crate. The other dog came in. What are you doing in my crate? So you need to be able to see these little games that, start to bubble up. And this doesn't mean that our dogs have anything wrong with them genetically and they're aggressive dogs.
Just playing games. They're entertaining themselves.
This is what strong dogs with drive start to do. They start to come up with all these little things. But heading it off on the front end is a very, very important point. And if you have had a few fights, we understand. We're not faulting you, but get help. Get help from some professional, wherever you want to find it, that is legitimate help where you can create more control in your household, you can create more structure in your household, and you are getting a professional to have eyes on the situation as well, so it doesn't just keep escalating and escalating and escalating, and now all of a sudden you're just running freaking like a dog fighting ring in your own house. Yeah, Nothing less pleasant than that, I promise.
If the fight was so traumatizing to you that you're living in a lot of fear of it happening again, then probably rehoming one of the dogs is the best thing for you, because some of these fights can be really traumatic for humans to see. A lot of blood, they can get really ugly really quick. We've been very fortunate, but
we're pretty safe too.
These are the kind of things that happen at dog daycares. It's okay,
we're not going after daycare. We're talking about inter-household fighting.
Yeah, but
all right, if you guys have seen a fight or you think there's something a brewing, Head it off on the front end. Get in there. Start putting some control and structure on those dogs, whatever that looks like to you. Switch up their day-to-day so you do not have a life-altering fight, because it only takes one fight, you guys. And I'm telling you, dogs can kill dogs faster than you think. We've known at least a dozen, probably closer to 24 dogs that have either killed another dog or a dog that's been killed by a dog. So it can become very serious, and we do not want that for you or your dog's psyche or your bank account. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We appreciate you tuning in every Wednesday. We hope that you gleaned something from this podcast. And if you don't have fighting within your own household, send this to someone else who may. Try to help them out. Help a brother out. All right, you guys, have a great week. And in the meantime, keep it quirky.
Guys.
Bye, guys.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.